like
Yeah.
this, of pushing them back like that. He had terrible trouble with the contractors and with the local authority. The contractors who were mercantilized tried to strong-arm him and bully him into building it in a totally different way. And they only did this by force of contract, which namely the architect, the traditional power. Some wanted to build another 2 stories on top here, so that they could have a sort of penthouse thing. Somebody wanted to build a big block at the end and block the whole thing off. They thought, let's block it off and enclose the centre so we can control and keep out the undesirable.
Effectively turn it into a gated community is what you're saying.
That's right. And what happened then, Patrick Hodgkinson, who was the designer, he is the instigator of this.
Do you mind if I film you saying this? This is very, very interesting. Is that all right?
No, that's okay. Patrick apparently got so sick and fed up with it, he left. And he went to Oxford and joined a famous practice there. Later on, it's quite a few years later, of the developers with their own architects, one of them suddenly had the bright idea to get Patrick Hodgkinson back into their business.
Oh, don't worry.
And give him the job of coming up with a solution. So he came back and had a second go at it.
That was the second redevelopment, is
That
what you're
was the
saying.
second, which is not all that long ago. I'm not quite sure. It's maybe 5 to 8 years ago.
Oh, as recently as that?
Yes, and the key, crucial thing, and this is totally fascinating, the place was a mess. The key thing was getting Waitrose to decide to come here. All of a sudden, you label it as a different level of outfit altogether. Then all the other wanted to come and see if Waitrose is here.
Since I was last here, I've noticed that the shops have all opened. There used to be some, and there used to be the cartoon museum was just over there.
Yes.
That's long gone. But
that's gone to King's Cross.
Well, it was near the British Museum.
What's it called? The Institute of Illustration or something.
Oh no, this is something rather different.
Oh, is it?
That's really interesting.
And the other thing they did, and it seems to jump around, but architecture is such a strange subject in a way. That was the key. This archetypal local authority, original structure, built on a budget, and you'll see where that those budgetary constraints had an effect on things when they start going up to money.
Yeah.
Suddenly saved by the arch supermarket selling stuff over the prices.
It's a signifier, isn't it? That's brilliant.
Saved it. How they came, they had nowhere else to go, and they realised there was no big supermarket in this area of Bloomsbury, you see. And that was pretty good lateral thinking, I think, on their part. Second thing I was going to say, first-class paving. Most people will put down rotten concrete slabs. This is Spanish or Portuguese fine-grained granite. This will last forever. And yet, you can clean this, you see, but you can't clean concrete. No. They have a machine that goes up and down and scrubs it all the time. So 2 things, straight quality.
That's fascinating.
There are many wonderful things about Hodgkinson's work here. The way he treated that Georgian street there as scenery outside the site for you to look at. All those houses are then all immediately were saleable and have all been improved. They're not that third-rate Georgian, really. That's not a sad thing to say about Georgian. But you could see them like and then he punched that hole through to look at the square and put that tiny, almost invisible little cinema.
Oh yes, right. You mean the hole there? Yes, yes.
Yeah. And there's one more tunnel which goes through there, which takes you to the post office.
So it's been thought about on on a human scale.
I never met him, but I believe he was a very intelligent designer. You can't say that about all designers, I'm afraid. Hodgkinson, who died earlier this year, just before he died, he walked through this area, not having seen it, for a long time, with tears running down his face. It had become, after all this time, I think, the place that he always imagined that he wanted to go. And it had happened. To him, it was just magic.
So when you said he pretty much gave his life to the project.
Yes, because in two chunks, when he was in the 70s and then coming back in the 80s, the 90s maybe even, to deal with the problem that nobody could decide what to do with it, whether they should pull it down.
Gosh. Well, that's a lovely end to the story.
Yes, I only learned this recently. A friend of mine said, "Did you never know him?" I said, "No." He said, I knew him, and I walked him through this site earlier this year, just before he died. He said that tears were running down his face.
That's lovely.
That's touching.
It's interesting, this whole subject, because if you look at some housing developments in other parts of London, where there's been a sort of an attempt at a common courtyard and so on, with certainly until recently, you wouldn't want to go and sit there. It wouldn't be a pleasant experience at all. And the worst associations would be that's where you'd either get mugged or you'd go to buy drugs or something like that. And for me, as I've said before, those are some of the associations I had with modernist developments.
Dimensions are so important, you see. This must be 9 feet. And you can see, because you need more than 9 feet. This is Hodgkinson understanding the importance of getting the dimensions right. So if it's too hot, you can sit under here. If it's pouring with rain, you can sit under here. You must have enough space in the middle, but not so much that the tension between the two sides breaks.
So it's all about pleasing proportions, which is, of course, at the heart of architecture.
Well, it's pleasing proportions, pleasing in a way that holds the interest. That's what pleasing about, satisfying. Really.
One of the things, having lived in Oxford, moving to London, although London is the capital where everything's meant to be happening, I did feel that there was nowhere to be. In Oxford, where if you're in the university, you can go and sit in the beautiful, the quads. If you aren't, there are the beautiful parks and so on. And you can almost sort of meet people there. You could feel part of a community, whereas in London it just seemed to be busy roads and busy streets, nowhere actually to stop, except some of the bigger landmarks, the British Museum outside. So to find something that's quite low-key on a human level and is a place where you can just sit is a great discovery.
I've had the interesting experience of living for 5 years in Covent Garden. And when I first went there, it was very attractive and buzzy, and I thought I would really enjoy it. I went off it because it's flooded with tourists and shoppers. Now, this is the best kept secret in London. Look, you can see there are no tourists here, very few. And it's not flooded, you see.
No.
Maybe the shops are disappointed that it isn't. And one or two of them have closed down, but they seem to be surviving.
It seems to be the right sort of balance.
Yes. Let's just walk through here.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll walk out the other way.
Sure. Okay.
The other interesting point I haven't mentioned, Patrick Hodgkinson's original idea was to extend this almost up to King's Cross. You're going to be able to walk all the way to King's Cross with the same development all the way.
I had no idea.
It would have been a stroke almost equal to John Nash's development at Regent's Street and Regent's.
Amazing.
but it got stopped for some reason. I think they ran out of money, or so people lost interest, and it was so contentious, and it had been so troublesome to build it. Well, they solved the drainage problem, you see. Was this interesting? Putting the water in. One of the sad things about English design is we're never good with fountains. You think what brilliant fountains you find in Italy and Spain. This has missed a chance. They could have had a marvellous fountain up here. And it's only a drop of water. The horses would have loved it, but unfortunately the horses have long left the district.
It does afford a certain blade of light on a sunny day.
I don't disagree with it, but it could be more dramatic, more exciting. Now this is...
Sorry.
One thing they haven't got right is the trees. Apparently the Greek owners want to change those trees, but they haven't got round to doing it. All those red things around it, they've delivered the soil for it, but they haven't changed the trees.
How do you know all this?
I met the manager. There's a manager of this.
Oh, I see. Oh, right.
And I went up to him and spoke. He was walking around, and I realised he must be the manager. And I spoke to him, and he said, "Oh, they want to change things." So this is a tunnel, whereas the other one is 2 stories high. Here's a clever thing. You punch a hole through 2 stories high. So it already becomes kind of grand as you go through, with the great Brunswick Square on the other side. And we'll walk through here just to complete this. Got a good mixture of shops here. I don't know whether this has been controlled, but here's a Boots, you see. Then there's a Robert Dyas over there for all your practical things. Other things are closed, but there is a Vodafone shop. The one thing it doesn't, well, it does have it, but it's hidden away, and that is a bookshop, and I'll show you.
Oh, you won't get far without a bookshop in this area, Dargan, will you?
Well, there is a remarkable one round the corner here. So you see, this is lined up with that street. It's not a particularly wonderful street, but there you have over there something you don't have here, in complete contrast, an old Victorian pub.
I'm not sure how well modernism always does pubs.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But I won a competition for pub design when I was still at the AA. I found
another portfolio.
Another piece of paper fell out of my files, which reminded me of this.
Oh, great.
Now, Marchmont Street is the street in London that has more blue plaques on it than anywhere else. You can already see 3. Have you ever seen 3 in a line together?
I've never seen 3 in a line.
Now, this is one of the things they had to do to get rid of the...
yes.
It's a keyed approach, you see. You can't get in here.
Yes.
And you'll see why this is so important when we go to my flat.
Sure.
We'll walk around the end here.
Okay.
Now, this is third class Georgian, and I use it only in the same sense that Nelson's battleships were already first grade, second grade, third grade.
Right.
You know, they're all equally good, just different purposes. These are small ones.
Yes.
It's all built on clay, so that you can see they're all wobbling about all over the place. Because they really didn't understand the drastic effects of building on London clay in those days. Post office, getting a rather short supply, but at least
Yeah.
we've got one here.
Indeed. I should stop and get those.
We're like mates before they got together. It's clear that like she was very jealous.
There's some more down here. Developers would love to pull this place down.
Oh
you see.
yes.
But somehow or other, whether Hodgkinson achieved this or whether he intended it, I think he did. He wanted to keep the Georgian frame within which new development was taking place.
Yes. Not
This
at
was
the.
called a mega structure. And architecture does not have a good glossary of definitions. It has highly technical things, mostly about the parts, but in the modern architecture, we're short of the correct word. But this was called a megastructure because it's mixed use, you see. Now, you think what's happening in London now, mixed use has been overtaken by single-use buildings. I'm sure Anna talks about this in her book, which I look forward to reading. There's another 2 blue parks down there, and there's another 2 or 3 down here.
I imagine that one of the reasons there are so many is that you have a central site that was probably quite affordable in those days.
Yes, and you'll see some of the famous people whose name you will know on our way to the Italian restaurant. Now look at this little gem. This is really nicely planted. I know nothing about how this was done or whether it was part of this, but there seems to be an unusual. Ever heard of them? Community spaces? I haven't.
I have seen an equivalent space, but
Look at this, in association with the Civic Trust, the Federation of City Farms and Gardens, Green Space, Natural England, the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts. You see the bookshop? It's books spelt backwards. You see?
yeah,
Scoobs.
Scoobs, very
Now
nice.
down. See, under the whole of this place is a huge garage. So they dealt with the cars. All underneath there, there's cars.
No, I'd never had no idea about that
for
either.
public parking and for private renting.
And the entrance is over there, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes, I know that. I understand now.
So at a stroke, he deals with one of the main problems. What the hell do you do with the damn cars?
Yeah. Amazing.
Put them underneath a building.
Yeah.
So you have to go down to that bookshop.
But it's fun. I think my flatmates aren't quite as happy as I am. But I'm so glad.
We're going around the outside now, Martin.
Yeah.
My doctors tell me that I must keep up the walking.
Yeah.
So I've set myself the little task when I really settled in here, which I
Yeah.
haven't quite yet, that each day I will at least walk the whole way round and then reward myself with a coffee. This, I think, is where the management office is. Look how much money they spent on this paving. It feels nice underfoot too.
It does.
The concrete, you see, does not weather well.
No.
I remember when the National Theatre was built, and the architect, whose name I've forgotten, but he was quite famous, was attacked by people saying, why have you not put proper cladding on it like they did at the Festival Hall with Portland stone stuck on the outside? You see, that's Portland stone. The National Theatre is raw concrete. And he said, to my absolute disgust, oh, it'll be fine when the lichens start growing on it. And I thought, you raving idiot, lichens don't grow on concrete and the atmosphere is too dirty.
Yes.
Lichens in the air are growing on the walls, and salmon in the river are two indicators of how pure the atmosphere is. Now this is the underpart, you see. But how clever he's been. By lifting this up, we have got a good old-fashioned terrace. And it's so nice to look down, so much nicer to look down on the park from a slightly elevated position. If you're down there, you don't see that beautiful scene. Clever. Delivering someone.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi, I've got a delivery for you. Hi.
Now all of a sudden you're back to raw concrete. You see.
Yes. This hall seems a little bit more utilitarian, if I'm allowed to say.
Council building, you said originally. Didn't spend the money. But also Hodgkinson being a man of his time. And this is sometimes called a brutalistic structure. But it's really, if it means anything at all, it's not a term I really like, but historians seem to continue to use the word brutalist. It means raw concrete, really. But raw concrete can be good or bad. Here we go. Sloping
Doors
structure.
opening.
Look at this. Come on. those doors were locked.
Yeah.
Anybody could come in here, sleep the night, and apparently this was all full up. It was a terrible thing.
Yes, I can imagine. But how did this fit the architect's vision? Because the outside is so well... It's well-intentioned, it's sensitive, it's on a human scale. Then to have this kind of experience greeting you on the inside seems unexpected.
You put your finger on a weak point of architectural education, which is really complete absence of teaching about social requirements and really a systematic teaching of user needs. Whether this continues today, it's something I would actually like, if I were 20 years younger, I would like to do research into it. I'm not sure to what extent architectural education today deals with
But it seems such an obvious problem. You build this beautiful structure. I'm sure the flats are absolutely delightful, but you leave this sort of, what would you call it, interior. I don't know if you could almost call it a strange sort of quadrangle.
Is it a naivety about human nature?
Possibly. But I have to say, it feels to me like...
There's very little in Corbusier or in any of the great modernists of the 30s for understanding what people would do with their buildings.
So what you're saying is when this was built, this would have been a rather more charming space that we're in now, or are you saying that it would always have been rather...
He wasn't alert to what could possibly happen.
But
the blame is put on local authorities who didn't maintain the housing of the 60s. And you mentioned something about funding being... They didn't maintain it. Or was the subject of maintenance? Maintenance of buildings, it's the subject we don't talk about. It's the elephant in the room, really. How do you maintain buildings? Now, this had to be completely rewired. We'll move on a bit.
sure, yeah.
I want to get into the restaurant. I want to talk about. Look at all the wiring, you see. But with a concrete structure, if you want to rewire, you can't drill through.
No.
Stick all the wires on the outside.
Ah.